Hey everyone, welcome back to Life with the Beckers. This week we're going to be baking again, making some caramel apple empanadas. So, let's check out the Becker bullets and we'll get
wrapping. Okay, and here are the ingredients that we're going to need for the caramel apple empanadas. So you need caramel, you need apples. We're going to use a little bit of the lemon juice, a little bit of cinnamon, the egg, of course. Don't want you to know what brand that is. And then aluminum foil just to keep everything clean in case we have any spillage. And then lastly, of course, our pre-made pie crust, because it's a lot easier to just buy these, set them out to thaw, and then use these. So we're going to just use one of these 9-inch pie crusts. So those are the ingredients, and let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to preheat our oven to 425 so that way it can get up to heat while we're working on this. And then we're going to foil our pan. Alrighty, and just like that, foiled. So this is where we're going to put our empanadas, and when we cook them, if we didn't seal the edge perfectly and we missed any points, it is going to leak because as it heats up, it creates pressure inside the empanada. And so you definitely want to make sure that wherever you put your empanadas, that it's not going to like leak into underneath the foil, because it's leaking caramel, and once that cooks, if it burns, it gets really hard and it's hard to get off your pan. So just keep that in mind. However much you want to foil it, feel free to do so, but I'm just going to stick with the one piece for now. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we will prep our apples. So a couple tools I like to use, just your regular potato peeler. I really like this, which is like an apple slicer, because it helps it go a lot faster. And then just a regular knife, just in case this piece misses anything that I want to cut off, I want to have that knife. So I'm going to go ahead and start by peeling the apples into the garbage, and then we'll use this to separate them and the knife to clean it up, and we'll go from there. So we'll go ahead and we'll do the apple peeling first. So my apples are not the prettiest, but that's okay, because the best part about this recipe is that they just go in the empanadas and no one sees them. So it's okay if it's not the prettiest apple. Alright, so that's peeled enough for me. I'm going to go ahead and set that one aside, and we will move on to the next one. And I do recommend that you go ahead and do Granny Smith apples for this recipe, for the same reason that they'd be good for apple pie. Just any apples, I guess, that you like in apple pie would be what you would want to use. For me, that's Granny Smith's, but if you prefer a different one, you can always use that. But I like that they're a little bit more sour. It just complements the caramel taste, I think, a little bit more than maybe a sweeter apple would. Alright, and that's good enough for that one. So now we'll use this. And this is just a way to make nice, easy apple slices. Runaway apple. Okay. So then we just push this down and kind of work out that core piece. We'll throw that away. We'll do the same thing to this one. Oh man, we got a wonky apple here, guys. There we go. Just had to get over the top of it. Can't really do that with you guys in the way, so it's your fault. Whoever you are viewing this, you got in my way. I'm just kidding. Okay, so now we do have one piece that kind of has that gross, so that's why we have the knife. We're going to go ahead and cut a few of those pieces that we don't like off, and then we'll chop these up into cubes. Okay, so now we're just going to remove any pieces of apple that we don't want to end up in our empanadas. So like this piece looks like that's just skin, but this is some of that core, so we're going to get rid of that bit. I'm also going to get rid of any skin that's left behind, just because when you bake it, it's not as soft and gooey as the rest of it, and it just ends up being a weird consistency. And I am a lot about consistency and texture when it comes to food rather than taste as much. I care way more about if it feels weird in your mouth than how it tastes, so. That one's a big one for me. But yeah, so whatever you don't want, whatever normal bits you remove when you would make apple pie, or whatever doesn't sound like it's appetizing to you, go ahead and cut it off. Some people think you should use as much as you can, and I don't disagree. But I think with something like this where it's a yummy dessert, you put in there what sounds good to you. Alright. So now what we're going to do is try to chop these up into cubes that are, fairly uniform. They don't have to be perfect. It depends on kind of your preference on what size. So obviously the bigger the apple is, the more it'll stay kind of firm. It won't cook down as much. So if you do really small apple pieces, you'll get really nice mushy like soft pieces. If you do bigger pieces, then they won't cook as much, and then you'll kind of still get some of that firmness. So I like to do kind of a middle ground. So I'm going to go ahead and cube all of these up, and then I'm going to go ahead and put them in this bowl, which I'm going to add some lemon juice to. And that's just going to coat them, and that'll help with both the flavoring and also keep them from turning a funny color. So we'll go ahead and get these chopped up, and then we'll see what that looks like. So now that we've got them all cut up, we have a few that are a little bit bigger obviously than others, so I'm just going to go through, find any of the bigger pieces, and just kind of make those a little bit smaller, closer to the size of the other pieces. And there's lots of ways to cut your apples more uniformly or more probably more strategic than I am. So if you have a better method that you want to share, definitely feel free to, comment in the video if you have a better idea, or comment a link to your YouTube video if you have a YouTube video that has a better way to cut apples for pie. Because for me, I just want to do what kind of is easy and intuitive and what makes sense to me. And so that's kind of why I do it like this. I like to make these for like just a little snack for like just for us at home for no real reason, just whenever we feel like it, because it's kind of like a little extra fancy dessert, but it's really not that much extra work. So now that we've got pretty much all of them down to the size that I'm happy with, okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add it all to our bowl so that we can toss in some lemon juice. So now we have our lemon juice. Which I can't open. Oh, there we go. Man, you guys, you don't know how much strength your middle finger gives your hand. I can't tell you. I snipped it in saving a baby from a runaway horse accident in the kitchen, and got some stitches in my finger. So ever since then, I just keep thinking, man, I use my middle finger for so much. Which sounded funny, but that's not what I meant. So the reason that we're going to toss these in lemon juice is just because it will help with the browning of the skin. So if you're a mom with kids and you're sending them like apple slices to school and they're brown by the time they get to school, if you put a little lemon juice on the apple slice, it will not turn brown. Plus lemon juice is good for you, or it's at least not bad for you. So we're just going to kind of toss that around. I'm not exactly sure why the lemon juice is good, but I know that you also use it if you're going to make like a strawberry syrup. It's good to use lemon juice, or if you're making like strawberries for a topping for cake, or really any fruit topping, it's good to add it. So I don't know why. If you know why, put it in the comments below. If you're a food scientist, educate all of us as to why the lemon juice makes yummy food taste yummier. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in whatever kind of pie spice that you would like to add. I just use cinnamon for mine, but if you want to get creative and add a couple others, or if you have like an apple pie spice already that's like in the container, then you can use that. And because the apples are wet, it does kind of coat them, so I like to only add a little bit at a time. You definitely don't want too much. I do it by eye. If you want to measure it, then I'll figure out what the measurement is in a second, and I'll tell you. Okay, so the proper recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of of pie spice. I keep wanting to say pumpkin pie spice. I don't know why, but to me there's only one kind of pie spice, and it's for pumpkin pie. At least in my brain is telling me that. Anyway, it's a tablespoon of whatever spice you want to add. I'm just going to go based on look, and that looks like about a tablespoon. And I'm kind of happy with how my apples are coated, not perfectly, but just a little bit all over. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and set this aside and let it kind of sit, and we'll cut out our dough rings. All right, so now that our crust is warmed up, we'll go ahead and open it. And then we'll just unroll it. All right, this is what I'm going to use to press out my circles. There's all different kinds of things you can use, and the reason I like to use this bowl is because it's glass, so I can see what's going on while I'm pressing it. And 2, I like this size because I feel like it's big enough that I can get enough in there, and it's still kind of like a snack size little dessert. With the smaller empanada circles, I feel like there's just not a lot of room in them, so I like to use this size. So whatever size you want to use, feel free to use, but keep in mind if your apple pieces are bigger, you might want to use a bigger circle size so that you can fit those, but you know, whatever works for you guys. So this is what I do, is I just use the bowl and kind of pick my first spot and try to get as close to the edge as I can and use up the least amount of unnecessary space. And you just kind of twist it back and forth, and then it'll actually kind of like separate itself. And we'll just go ahead and put the circles over there. And then again, just trying to overlap, or not overlap, but get as close as I can to that other circle. And then just twist it until it comes out. And if it sticks, then just push in a little bit. You can kind of break the seal. Just, there we go. Like you were trying to push it into the bowl further. Okay, so now that we did the first 4, obviously we can't cut any more out. So what I'm going to do is knead this back together and roll it out with a pin, and then I'll be able to get maybe at least one, but maybe 2 more circles out of that, hopefully. So we'll see. I don't normally use gloves for something like this, but I'm going to use them today so that I can keep my injury area clean. So, pardon the squishing of the gloves, but and I know just from experience with this brand that this is going to be a little bit too dry. So I'm just going to add a tiny sprinkle of water. And that's just so that it'll start to stick together again and actually form a solid piece of dough instead of looking like a circle, but then once you bake it, it's not a complete circle and it has gaps in it, and then it'll leak caramel everywhere, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So just making sure this is back to being a like cohesive ball. Now we're just going to use our pin to kind of roll out a new flat sheet that we can cut some circles out of. And again, for me, this is just like a nice, easy, like breakfast snack or like late night dessert. So I'm not too worried about how like perfect this turns out. You know, if you are making it for a fancy dress party or something, then you may want to give a little more attention than I am to some of the like size and shape and stuff like that of these last couple to get them closer. Or if you're really wanting it to be perfect, you could just use the second pie crust and make yourself a couple more circles out of that and just use the scraps for something else. It's whatever you'd like, but what I'm trying to do is get it the same thickness. That's my main concern, so that it cooks the same. And that looks pretty good to me for thickness, so I'll just go ahead and squeeze out. There we go. And we'll just do the same thing again. So this one, I'm just going to try to get as close to a circle shape as I can, and then I'll just use the bowl to cut the edges off and make it a clean circle. Okay, my best judgment says that maybe this is not going to end up the same. Maybe it is enough. And I'm just too much of an amateur, but I think this might be not quite enough dough to get it to be a circle for me. That's still thick enough that it won't tear. Okay, we're gonna make one just that's organic shaped, guys. All right, and this one is going to be our wonky shaped one. So now that we're done with that, we'll clean up this space a little bit, and then we'll get our filling ready the rest of the way, and then we'll put it all together and we'll put them in the oven. So I moved our apples to this bigger bowl so that I can actually stir easy. And then we're going to add our caramel sauce. So this is the bit that all of you folks that were looking for a lazy recipe, you're like, yeah, but where's the lazy part, Carmen Jessie? Where's the lazy part? Here it is. Look, caramel in a jar, pre-made. Honestly, I don't love doing it this way. I would definitely rather the like brown sugar and butter and kind of old traditional method, but this stuff tastes just as good. And what's really nice is that it's the same consistency every time. So you know what to expect. It's not one where you're making it and it can be, you know, more runny, less runny, whatever. So what we're going to do is, normal recipes call for adding quite a bit of caramel to the apples, and I feel like whenever I add it to our circles, it ends up being really messy. So what we're going to do is we're going to add just enough caramel to coat our apples, and then we'll add a little extra caramel to each of these circles as we put them together. So what that means, and if you've been here for any amount of time, you already know this is coming. I'm going to eyeball it. All right, I'm just going to stir this around and incorporate that. Add a little bit more. Most recipes call for about 1/4 of a cup to 1/2 of a cup of this caramel sauce in the apples. Most recipes call for about 2/3 of a cup to be used overall. You just add the remaining of the 2/3 of a cup into the individual circles. So I really don't want there to be a lot of extra caramel in my apples for the way I like to make them, because then when I'm scooping it into the pouches, into the circles, the dough, it's not as drippy. I like that better. I'd rather drip caramel into each one rather than have the first couple have a lot or the last couple have a lot. So I'm really trying to avoid any extra like pooling of caramel in the bottom or anything like that. I just want it to be coating all of the apples and have them all be covered in it and not stuck to each other. So that's kind of the goal here. And I like how that looks, so we're done with that part. So now we're going to take our egg, whose brand name you do not know, and we're going to make a little egg wash. So I just added a little touch of water to it to make the egg wash. I'm just going to incorporate all of it. And this is what we're going to use to stick the sides together after we close the empanada over on top of the delicious guts. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take our egg wash, and then we'll just go ahead and add that to the edge of the first one that we're going to do. Just to make sure I get it all, do a little bit extra. And what I'm doing is just kind of closing one side a little bit, not on the inside, but on the edge. Because I found that it starts to drip pretty quick, and so if I make this little edge, it works a little bit better for me. So I'm just going to take a scoop of filling. I'm going to place it, make sure it all will fit. If I grab too much, put a little bit back. And this is where I'm going to start to close up the empanada on the two sides. And we're going to really want to pinch that together and make sure we've got a good seal. Otherwise it will leak later. And so once you kind of have this like talking mouth, I mean it's not talking, but it looks like a little mouth, I'm going to use that to kind of add a little extra caramel sauce. And then just kind of work it in there. And again, my empanadas are not going to be your most beautiful brunch empanadas that you've ever seen. And they're not going to be anything like anyone's grandma's ever made, because I'm not that good yet. I'm not even a mom, let alone a grandma, so I've got work to do. But if you're somebody who's sitting at home thinking like, man, I remember this one time I had these great caramel apple empanadas and they were just so good, and it'd be great if I could have them at home. Well, then this is for you. So now that we kind of have this pie shape here, this like crescent, what we're going to do is use a fork tine, and we're just going to take these and press into that and really make sure that it's mixed the two edges together into one smooth edge. And then lastly, we're just going to put a couple of slits right in the top. And that's going to be to let out steam while it's cooking. If you don't put good slits all the way through all the way through the dough into the inside, it will start to cook together. So make sure that you can see the filling inside, that it is actually all the way through, and not just like a depression into the dough, but actually cuts through it. So we'll just go ahead and keep repeating that for the rest of them, and then we'll have a full tray. Okay, so same thing for the next one. So again, just starting to close up the edges first to make sure it doesn't leak. Adding that little bit of caramel. And then lastly, we just have our couple of slits that we're going to put in there. Again, all the way through to the filling. That way those extra steam and pressure can escape there. This one was interesting. That's why we do them around, because it's easier. I didn't doubt that, but now I know firsthand. I feel like it's a lot easier when you fill it in your hand instead of when you fill it on the pan. Because I feel like when it's in your hand, it's easier to tell how full it is and if you need more or less filling or how much will fit in there. But when it's on the flat on the pan, it's really hard to tell how much it's going to hold. Okay, so now that we have a full tray, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to take our egg wash and we're going to put it over all of the empanadas. So we're just going to coat the top, kind of just go around. And I like to really get in the little fork tine spots. Make sure the egg wash gets in there. I really recommend one of these rubber brushes for stuff like this, because I feel like the bristles are just firm enough that it works really good for this, but it's a lot easier to clean, and yeah, I just like it. I feel like it's more useful than like a traditional style brush for this kind of stuff. So we're just going to coat all of them in egg wash. Make sure that you haven't missed a spot. And the reason why you want to make sure that you're getting all of it is because we're about to sprinkle on a little bit of sugar and a little bit of cinnamon. And when we do, it's going to stick to everything that's wet really well, and anything that's dry, it's not going to stick to at all. And so that's why you want to make sure you're getting the top and the back and all of that. All right, so now we'll add the sugar. As far as what kind of sugar is best, a lot of people like to use like sugar in the raw, or like fancy sugars. I don't have that, so I'm just going to use regular old brown sugar, just light brown sugar for mine. You don't need a topping for them really, but it just makes them look a little bit fancier and look more kind of like what you would get at like a restaurant or at a traditional place. So basically we're just going to sprinkle on a little bit. And the reason I like to use brown sugar is just because that's what I would want on a pie. I think it tastes the best with it, but also because I think it's the closest to the like structure of those like crystal sugars that they'll use for stuff like this. And so it kind of gives you a similar result. And then just gonna add a little tiny bit of cinnamon. And again, these are both optional, up to you if that's what you want to do. But I just like the way it looks, and I feel like it does add a little bit of flavor as well to the crust. So now we've got everything all ready to go. We're going to go ahead and put our pan into the oven. So now what we're going to do is bake these for about 20 minutes or so. You know, until the dough is golden brown, and then we'll remove it from the oven. So we'll go ahead and put that in for 20 minutes and we'll check back in with you guys. All right. Took them out a couple minutes early because they were looking nice and brown. So these ended up being in the oven for only 18 minutes at 425. So as you can see, I might have put a little bit too much caramel in there because all of them kind of oozed a little bit out, and once that caramel's been cooking, it really likes to burn. So that's kind of what we were trying to avoid, but that's okay. It didn't burn any of the actual empanadas too much, so I think it'll work out just fine. So these are nice and hot. We're gonna let these cool off maybe 5 or 10 minutes at least before we try to remove them, but we'll let you guys get a nice cross-section view. We know that's what you've all been waiting for, haven't you? You've watched this whole video just to see me cut open an empanada. That's okay. I feel the same way. We'll cut it open in 10 minutes or so. All right, guys. So here we have them, our delicious caramel apple empanadas. That's yummy. Here they are, all baked, cooled down, and looking delicious. So let's cut one open. Give you guys the full effect. Nice crunchy crust. Crumbly inside. And these ones are a little bit more dry. Like I said, I don't like when they're too juicy, and then it did ooze a little bit. As you can see, we got some of that burnt edge like over here on this one there. But yeah, so these ones are a little bit more dry, but as you can see, we still have some caramel in there. And Jesse's opinion is they taste like more appley than caramely, but still very good. So that's kind of the view there. So, you know, adjust accordingly as your family likes. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to feed my spoiled little doggy a piece of this empanada. Roomba, sit. Okay, go ahead. What do you think? Well, she's eating it, so it must be good. Yes, yummy. All right, so they're a hit with everybody. Good little easy but looks fancy snack. And if you can keep your caramel from spilling over and burning it, they'll look a little bit schnazzier. But I honestly have not perfected that yet, so feel free to put it in the comments below if you know a good tip to keep it from spilling over. Yeah, any other tips that you have, feel free to put them in the comments below. And thanks for watching, guys. Back to you, Jesse and Carm.
All right, those were really good. One extra little thing is at the end, if you wanted to drip some more of the caramel like into the completed empanadas, then they'll be a little bit more caramely and that kind of thing. But it might be kind of messy, so just do that at your own risk, of course.
Yeah, a little drizzle on top definitely would be good. Jesse recommended that at the end, and I thought that was smart, both into the little pocket, but then also you could just do like a little drizzle on top. But either way, yeah, it was fun to make, and we hope you enjoyed watching. And as always, you know, if you enjoyed it, subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, subscribe. We might do something new that you do like. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and share with your friends, and
leave any suggestions in the comments about different recipes that you'd like to see or anything like that.
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
On this side here.
Ooh, I wish you guys could smell this. It smells so good.